October 1958, Burbank, California.
Here you are, sir.
The NBC Studios on Alameda
thank you.
Avenue, Building B,
He'll be
the
all
East
right
Corridor
now.
on the ground floor, 7:30 in the morning. A man named Albert Deems has been mopping this corridor every weekday morning for 11 years. He is mopping it right now. A studio supervisor in a brown suit is walking toward him from the far end of the hall with a manila folder and the expression of a man who has already made a decision and is simply traveling toward it. At the far end of the corridor, leaning against the wall outside Studio 3 with a paper cup of coffee and a script he is not reading, a young comedian named Johnny Carson watches the supervisor come down the hall. He has been watching since the supervisor turned the corner. He does not move. Outside on Alameda Avenue, a man in a tan Stetson and a canvas ranch jacket pushes through the side entrance and walks into the building. Nobody recognizes him yet. Here is the story. Albert Deems is 58 years old. He is a slight man, narrow through the shoulders, with a careful way of moving that comes from 11 years of navigating a working television studio without being in anyone's way. He came to NBC in 1947, the year the Burbank facility opened, hired as part of the original maintenance crew. He was one of 6 men brought in that first week. The other 5 have come and gone over the years. Albert has stayed. He knows every light switch, every fuse box, every boiler valve, and every temperamental door hinge in the building. He knows which dressing room sink runs cold first thing in the morning, and which stage door sticks in November when the air comes off the hills damp. He is the first person in the building every morning and the last to leave on most nights. He has a daughter named Patricia. She is 22 years old and in her second year of nursing school at UCLA. The tuition is $180 a semester. Albert has been paying it from his NBC salary, $62 a week, since she enrolled. He does not tell Patricia how he manages it. He manages it by eating lunch from a bag he packs at home, and by not replacing the sole on his left work shoe, which he has resoled twice in the past year with a kit from the hardware store on Victory Boulevard. The sole is starting to separate again. He has a wife named Estelle, who works 4 mornings a week at a dry cleaner on Magnolia. Between the two of them, they keep the house in Van Nuys, which they have owned since 1951, and they keep Patricia in nursing school, and they keep Albert's mother, who is 81 and lives in the back bedroom and has not been entirely well since the spring. Albert Deems is not a man who talks about himself. He is not a man who asks for things. He is a man who arrives first and leaves last, and fixes what is broken, and does not wait to be asked. In 11 years at NBC, he has been written up in the maintenance log exactly once, in 1952, when a pipe burst behind Studio 2 on a Sunday night, and he drove in from Van Nuys at 11 o'clock because the overnight crew called him, and he was the only one who knew where the shutoff valve was. The write-up was a commendation. It is the only piece of paper with his name on it in the NBC personnel files that is not a timekeeping record. He does not know it is there. Nobody told him. The trouble started 3 weeks ago. A new head of studio operations came in from the New York office. His name is not important. He is 34 years old, and he went to Dartmouth, and he has a list of operating costs that he has been reducing since his first Monday morning. 3 weeks ago, he looked at the maintenance budget and decided the overnight cleaning contract and 3 of the 6 morning custodial positions were redundant. He sent memos. The memos went to the supervisors. The supervisors drew names. Albert Deems's name was on the list. Nobody told Albert. That is how these things worked in 1958 in a building like this. You found out when the supervisor walked down the hall with the folder. It is 7:30 in the morning. Albert is mopping the east corridor of Building B. The mop moves in the slow, even arcs of a man who has mopped this floor so many times, the motion is no longer something he thinks about. He is thinking about Patricia's midterm exams, which are next week. He is thinking about his mother's appointment with the doctor on Thursday. He is thinking about the sole of his left shoe. He does not hear the supervisor coming until the supervisor is 20 feet away. The supervisor stops. He opens the folder. He reads from it in the flat, careful voice of a man who has been told to read from a prepared statement and is doing so. Position elimination. Effective immediately. 2-week severance. Benefits through end of month. He turns the top page over and holds the folder out to Albert. Sign at the bottom. Albert looks at the folder, then at the supervisor. He does not take the folder. He has worked in this building for 11 years. He has mopped this corridor approximately 2,800 times. He has never been late. He has never called in sick more than twice in a calendar year. He fixed the boiler himself on a Sunday in February of 1953, when the repair service could not come until Monday, and the building was cold, and the shooting schedule could not move. He was not asked to fix it. He just knew how, and he did it. He looks at the folder for a long moment. Then he looks at the mop in his hand. Then he looks at the floor he has just mopped, still wet, reflecting the fluorescent light of the corridor in long, pale stripes. At the far end of the corridor, Johnny Carson has not moved from the wall outside Studio 3. He is 32 years old, lean, dark-haired, in a sport coat and open collar, the script still in his hand. He has worked in this building for 14 months. He has seen Albert Deems every morning he has been here. Albert is the man who shows up first. Albert is the man who knows where everything is. Albert is the man who, 6 months ago, found Carson's wristwatch on the floor outside Studio 3 at 6 in the morning and left it on Carson's dressing room shelf with a note that said, "Found this, thought it was yours." Carson has not forgotten that. He watches the supervisor holding the folder out to Albert. He does not move. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The side entrance door at the end of the corridor opens. A man in a tan Stetson and a canvas ranch jacket comes in off Alameda Avenue. He is here for a wardrobe fitting for a picture starting next week at Warner Brothers, which is 2 blocks east. His driver dropped him at the wrong studio. He figures it out as soon as he is inside. He is about to turn around. He stops. 50 feet down the corridor, a slight man in gray work clothes is standing with a mop in his hand. Looking at a folder, a younger man in a suit is holding out to him. The younger man is not looking at the man with the mop. He is looking at the wall to the left of the man with the mop, with the expression of someone waiting for a signature. The man in the Stetson does not turn around. He walks down the corridor. His boots are loud on the wet floor. The supervisor hears him coming and looks up. Albert hears him and looks up. At the far end of the hall, Johnny Carson straightens off the wall. The man in the Stetson stops beside Albert. He looks at the supervisor. He does not look at the folder. What's the reason? The supervisor looks at him. Sir, this is an internal personnel matter. I heard that. What's the reason? The supervisor looks at the folder. Position elimination. Studio operations restructuring. How long has he worked here? The supervisor glances at the folder. 11 years. The man in the Stetson is quiet for a moment. He looks at Albert. Albert is looking at him with the careful expression of a man who does not yet know what is happening, but has decided to be still while he finds out. What's your name? Albert. Albert Deems. The man looks back at the supervisor. Who made this decision? The supervisor shifts his weight. The head of studio operations. It's a budget decision, sir. Several positions are being... Take me to him. The supervisor blinks. Sir, I don't think... Right now. Take me to whoever signed this. The supervisor looks at the folder. He looks at the man in the Stetson. Something is happening in his face, the slow arrival of a recognition he has been resisting since the boots came down the corridor. He closes the folder. He walks. The man in the Stetson follows him. Before he goes, he looks at Albert once. He does not say anything. He touches the brim of his Stetson and walks after the supervisor. Albert stands in the corridor with his mop. The floor around him is still wet. He does not move for a moment. He looks at the wet floor. He looks at the waste bin on his cart. He looks at the far end of the corridor where the supervisor turned the corner and disappeared with the man in the Stetson behind him. He has been in this building for 11 years, and he has never seen anyone follow a supervisor up to the 3rd floor the way a man follows a thing he has already decided to finish. He picks up his mop. He finishes the corridor. That is what he knows how to do, and so that is what he does. At the far end of the hall, Johnny Carson comes off the wall and walks toward him. He stops in front of Albert. He looks at the closed folder the supervisor left on the floor beside Albert's cart when he forgot to take it with him. He picks it up. He looks at it. Then he looks at Albert. You got somewhere to be right now? Albert looks at him. No, sir. Carson nods at the mop. Finish your corridor. He holds the folder out to Albert. Don't sign anything. Albert takes the folder. He looks at it. Then he sets it on his cart and picks up his mop and finishes the corridor. It took 22 minutes. That is how long the man in the Stetson was in the office of the head of studio operations on the third floor of Building B. Nobody in that room ever described exactly what was said. The head of operations was 34 years old and had been in his position for 3 weeks and had never been in a room with John Wayne before. A secretary outside the office said later that she heard very little because the conversation was conducted almost entirely in a normal speaking voice, which she found more remarkable than if it had been loud. What is known is this: John Wayne came back down to the east corridor of Building B 22 minutes after he went up. Albert Deems had finished the corridor and was starting on the cross hall. Carson was still there, sitting on an equipment crate outside Studio 3, the script finally open in his lap. Wayne stopped beside Albert's cart. He picked up the folder and held it out to Albert. "Tear it up." Albert looked at the folder, then at Wayne. He tore it in half. He tore it again. He put the pieces in the waste bin on his cart. Wayne looked at him. "You're here tomorrow morning, same as always." Albert was quiet for a moment. His hands were on the cart handle. They were the hands of a man who had been pushing a cart in this building for 11 years, and who was going to push it for 11 more. "Mister," he said, "I don't know what you said up there. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. My daughter is in nursing school. My mother is sick. I've got a house note." Wayne looked at him for a long moment. "I know," he said. "That's why it matters that you're here tomorrow." Albert looked at the torn folder pieces in the waste bin. Then he looked at Wayne. "I would like to know your name," he said, "so I can tell my daughter. She asks me sometimes if anything interesting happens at work." Wayne almost smiled. "Tell her a fellow came in the wrong door and walked down the wrong hall." He picked up his hat from where he had set it on the cart while he was talking. He put it on. He looked down the corridor toward the exit. Carson stood up from the equipment crate. He had been quiet the whole time in the way a man is quiet when he is watching something he knows he will not forget. He looked at Wayne. "Why'd you stop?" Wayne looked at him. "You were already watching. You could have moved first." Carson was quiet for a moment. He looked at the floor. "I didn't know if it was my place." Wayne looked at him for a long second. "It's always your place," he said, "when you're the one who's there." He walked down the corridor and out the side door onto Alameda Avenue and got into his car and went to his wardrobe fitting at Warner Brothers, which was 2 blocks east and was 25 minutes late, which he did not apologize for because he was John Wayne and nobody asked him to. Albert Deems worked at NBC Burbank for 9 more years. He retired in 1967 at the age of 67. He replaced the sole on his left work shoe one final time in the spring of 1959, this time at a proper cobbler on Ventura Boulevard, and did not use the hardware store kit again. Patricia paid for it. She had started working part-time at a clinic in Westwood by then, and would not let him argue about it. Patricia Deems graduated from UCLA nursing school in 1960. She worked for 31 years at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She retired as a head nurse in 1991. Johnny Carson took over The Tonight Show in 1962. He hosted it for 30 years. He never once told the story on air. He told it privately, once, to a writer named Kenneth Tynan, who was profiling him for The New Yorker in 1978. Tynan's notes from that interview are in the Kenneth Tynan archive at the British Library in London. The relevant passage is on page 11 of Notebook 4. It reads, "Carson said the thing he remembered most was not what Wayne said in the office upstairs. It was what he said in the corridor afterward. It's always your place when you're the one who's there." Carson said he had thought about that line more than almost anything anyone had ever said to him in 30 years of television. Albert Deems died in 1974. Estelle kept the house in Van Nuys. Patricia came back from Cedars-Sinai on weekends and kept the garden the way her father had kept it, which was carefully and without any wasted motion. In the east corridor of Building B at NBC Burbank, the fluorescent lights have been replaced twice since 1958. The floor has been retiled. The Studio 3 door no longer sticks in November. The building has been through 4 heads of studio operations since the one who sent the memo. The corridor looks like every other corridor in every other television studio in America. There is nothing in it that tells you what happened there on a Tuesday morning in October of 1958 at 7:30, when a man with a mop stood still and waited to find out what the day was going to do, and a man in a tan Stetson walked down the wrong hall and decided it was his hall anyway. If this story reached you, do me a favor, pass it on. Share it with someone who showed up this morning when they didn't have to. There are more stories coming.